Tan So Sim, who had no biological children but adopted 4, passed away without formalizing any wills or any testamentary wishes. So a solicitor, at the request of her husband's second wife, Tan Boon-ki, prepared a document on Tan So Sim's deathbed, allegedly reflecting her intent for her siblings, the Koo and Tan children, to renounce their claims for her estate in favor of her adopted children and Tan Boon-ki. And then for the dispute, the Koo and Tan children signed the document behaving it honoured Tan So Sim's wishes, but its validity as a testamentary instrument or contract under Section 26A of the Contracts Malay Tax Ordinance 1950 was challenged after her death. And for the third one, legal issue, the case addressed the enforceability of informal documents in inheritance law, questioning whether the document constitute a valid testamentary instrument or an enforceable contract amidst dispute over the deceased estate distributions. Okay, so move into the facts of the case. So as we know, Tan So Sim, who adopted 4 children, was the eldest daughter of her mother, and basically she got 4 children from her first marriage and 7 Koo children from her second. So the families maintained friendly relation despite different parentage. Okay, so as a deathbed document, we know that Tan So Sim forget or maybe doesn't have wills, or maybe never formalized a will, but a solicitor prepared a document at the request of Tan Boon-ki, the second wife of Tan So Sim's husband. The document declared that the Koo and Tan children renounced their claim to Tan So Sim's estate in favor of her 4 adopted children, and Tan Boon-ki, believing it reflect Tan So Sim's wills and her siblings signs the document. There is no problem on that things.
The next part is identification of legal issues. So we have 3 points here. The first one is whether the signed document by family members can be considered was valid, whether the solicitor and Tan Boon-ki act appropriately or exerted undue influence. The last one is whether the document could be considered Tan So Sim's will despite her unconscious state. The general rule is that if there is no consideration, something of value exchange, an agreement isn't legally binding. That's what Section 26 of the Contracts Act 1950 says. But there are some exceptions, like when an agreement is based on natural love and affection between close family members. What counts as close can differ depending on the customs and practices of each social group. So in this case, Tan So Sim was on her deathbed and too ill to make a will. Her brothers and sisters signed a document prepared by a solicitor, giving up their claims to her estate in favor of her 4 adopted kids and Tan Boon-ki. This was said to be Tan So Sim's final wishes. The big question was whether this document was valid for dividing her estate. The court decided it wasn't. They ruled that there wasn't enough evidence of natural love, affection, or closeness between the parties, so the document didn't count as a valid contract. Let's move to the second issue. Section 16 of the Contracts Act talks about undue influence. Basically, it says a contract can be considered unfair if one party is in a position to dominate the will of another and use that position to gain an advantage. In this case, the focus is on whether Tan Boon-ki and the solicitor act in good faith or if there was any undue influence. Tan Boon-ki, who was Chan's second wife, asked the solicitor to draft the renunciation document to deceased family members and renounce all claims to Tan's estate in favor of her 4 adopted children and herself. The family members was told it reflect Tan So Sim's last wishes. The solicitor acted as an advisor and drafted the document based on what was said to be Tan So Sim's intentions. However, they didn't verify her wishes or get a formal testamentary execution. Tan Boon-ki, as the one pushing for the renunciation, had a personal interest in making sure significant parts of the estate went to herself and adopted kids. This raises concerns about a conflict of interest. Meanwhile, the family members, including the Tan and Koo children, signed the document without getting independent legal advice. They also didn't seem to have a chance to properly think through the implications or consult anyone. This creates a clear imbalance of power and understanding, which is a key issue when evaluating undue influence. It shows whether everyone involved truly gave informed consent.
I will be discussing whether the document could be considered Tan So Sim's will despite her unconscious state. Now, let's discuss about this issue. First is the concept of sound mind. According to Section 12 of the Contracts Act 1950, a person must be capable of understanding a document and forming a rational judgment about its effect on their interests. Next, we examine the role of the solicitor. The solicitor prepared the renunciation instrument at the request of Tan Bo-ki. These document declarations from the Koo and Tan children, stating that they abandoned all their claims to Tan So-sim except in favor of the 4 adopted children and Tan Bo-ki. The preparation of this document raised questions about proper verification and approval. Next, let's focus on Tan So-sim herself. At the time the document was prepared, she was unconscious and unable to communicate. She never regained consciousness to verify, approve, or sign the renunciation instrument. Hence, she didn't meet the criteria of sound mind. Moving on the requirements for a testator. A testator must have a sound mind and be capable of forming rational judgment. This requirement applies even when a document is based on an alleged oral declaration from the testator. Since Tan So-sim was unconscious, she couldn't fulfill these essential requirements. Finally, let's discuss the validity of the document. The document was not verified or signed by Tan So-sim. Without her understanding or approval, it doesn't reflect her personal testamentary intention. Because of this, the validity of the document is questionable and is still under investigation.
Now, I would like to explain the court decision and grounds. The court ruled that the renunciation document was invalid. This decision was based on the several legal principles, which is the Section 26A of the Contract Act 1950. Agreement without valuable consideration are void unless met for natural love and affection between near relations and expressed in writing. Next is the Section 16 of the Contract Act 1950. Undue influence invalidates agreement where one party unfairly dominates another. And the last one is Section 12 of the Contract Act 1950. A contract is valid only if the person creating it is sound mind. So the court concluded that the renunciation instrument did not meet this requirement. As a result, Tan So-sim estate was distributed equally among her legal heirs, which is the 3 full sisters and 7 half siblings, under the distribution enactment Cap 71, rather than as specific in the renunciation agreement. Now, I would like to explain the reason for the decisions. The first reason is about the natural love and affection. The court found the document to be unilateral renunciation without consideration or mutual agreement. It was not a valid contract under the contract ordinance because it lacked valuable consideration. Section 26A allows agreement without consideration if made out of natural love and affection between near relations. So the first reason is about the no near relation. The court determined that the adopted children of Tan So-sim's late husband were not near relation to her siblings under Chinese customary law. According to Chinese custom and family law, the adopted children were part of the adoptive father's family but were too remote in relation to legal heirs of Tan So-sim and not directly related to Tan So-sim's siblings. And the second one is about the no evidence of affection between parties. The evidence only demonstrates affection between Tan So-sim and her siblings. There were no proof of affection between the sibling and the adopted children of Tan Bo-ki. The court noted that the no evidence of love and affections between the legal heirs and the adopted children sufficient to validate the agreement under Section 26A. Although Tan So-sim had made an oral declaration during her last illness, Tan So-sim expresses her desire to divide her estate among her adopted children. The legal issue is whether the legal heirs stood in the near relation to the adopted children. So under Section 26A, an agreement must be expressed in writing, be registered if applicable, and involves near relation to be varied, but this was lacking in the case.
Let us move to undue influence. In legal basis, Section 16 of the Contract Act defines undue influence as using a dominant position to gain an unfair advantage. In this case, Tan Bo-ki, as the deceased husband's secondary widow, had a vast interest in securing significant portion of the estate for herself and the adopted children. She has a central role in requesting the solicitor to draft a renunciation document, it creating a potential conflict of interest. The Koo and Tan siblings were not provided with independent legal consult before signing the document. They relied on the representation that the document is reflected the deceased wishes, which they could not verify it. It also showed the imbalance of power. The signatory were pressured into signing the document under the belief that it honored by Tan So-sim's wishes. As the result, the court determined that the situation of the document creation, coupled with the lack of independent consult and potential correction, suggested undue influence, making the document invalid. According to Section 12 of the Contract Act states that the person must have a sound mind to make a valid contract. In this case, create the incapacity to conform intention situation. At the time of the reassignation document preparation, Tan Su Sing was unconscious and incapable of understanding or approving the instrument. She never regained consciousness to verify the document, making it impossible to confirm her true intention. They only based on arranged oral declaration made by Tan Su Sing communicated through Tan Boy Ki. This raised the significant doubt about the validity and accuracy. So, as a result, the court ruled that as a unilateral agreement, as there was no formal testamentary expression or binding contract. Under the distribution amendment, the estate should be distributed equally among the 10 eligible siblings and half-siblings.
Okay, now we're talking about the supporting legal principles and precedents. The legal principle and precedent in this case illustrate the balance between statutory law, custom, and evidence. Under Section 26A of the Contract Ordinance, agreement without consideration and are void unless based on natural love and affections between close relations and expressed in writings. This ensures only genuine family agreements hold legal weight. Chinese family law recognizes adoptions by limited inheritance right to the adoptive father lineage. However, the distribution enactment Cap 71 governing interstate succession for non-Muslim descendants in Malay take precedence over the customary law like this. Relevant cases reinforce this. Stabilians v. Stabilians highlight the family compromise require valid considerations, and Kings v. Cockpins confirm statutory laws or override conflicting custom. Okay, now we move on to the conclusions. The renunciation instrument was declared invalid because it did not follow the rules under the Contracts Act 1950. First, there was no natural love and affections between the people involved, which is key requirement for the agreement to be valid. Second, the way the document was prepared and signed shows signs of undue influence. Third, the deceased were unconscious and unable to check or agree to the document made it invalid. Because of this, the estate of the late Tan Su Sing was shared equally among her legal heirs. As stated in the distribution enactment Cap 71, this outcome shows how important it is to follow legal rules and process, especially in inheritance case. It also reminds us that such matters shall be handled carefully to protect the right and fairness for everyone involved.
The last part is critical evaluation. In this part, we would like to discuss about the strengths, weaknesses, and the broader implication due to the case. So in strengths, the court upheld established legal principles from the Contract Act 1950 and the Distribution Enactment, ensuring the decision was grounded in statutory law and avoided subjective interpretation of informal agreements. Additionally, it respected Chinese customary practices while emphasizing that statutory law prevails in conflicts, setting a precedent for balancing personal and statutory requirements. While in weaknesses, the court's strict adherence to legal formality dismissed the deceased's alleged oral declaration, overlooking the spirit of her intentions and potentially leading to outcomes contrary to her wishes. The decision exposed the limitation of outdated inheritance law that failed to accommodate modern family dynamics, such as recognizing the inheritance rights of adopted children. In legal implications, the decision reinforced that informal agreements or oral declarations lack legal weight without proper documentation, shaping future inheritance disputes. It also highlights the need for transparency and independent legal advice to prevent undue influence in estate planning. While in social implications, strict statutory distribution may heighten family tensions if it contradicts perceived wishes of the deceased. Additionally, reduced trust in informal agreements could lead to more estate-related litigations as families turn to formal legal processes.